excited to host this or moderate this event with you today with Upswell. The panel topic is building bridges in the midst of rising division. And if you know everything that's happening in the world or the country right now, that's a really big topic, or a really big boulder for us to push up the hill right now. So what you can expect to hear over the next hour plus is you can expect to hear from panelists, and they're a really good group of people, on what it means to be a bridge builder weaving through a pandemic and how we build trust during times of crisis. We're going to have some breakout discussions for more intimate conversations facilitated by some of my colleagues from Aspen and Weave, where you're going to hear more about weavers, how weavers are building bridges in their communities. And at the end, we're going to regroup with some questions and answers with our panelists and a chat about what they expect in the future to come. So I want to make a couple acknowledgments right now before we dive in. Ongoing violence around the country to and against Black people. I have to make that alive right now as we go into the discussion. I also want to talk about climate crisis that we have right now, hurricanes and fires that are happening on our nation's West Coast. And then I want to talk about the rising political division that you see every day with political ads and the news and so forth. Let that be in the forefront of the conversation that we have today, because I expect that we'll walk away with some really good tools on how to still be a bridge builder in a time with all these things raging around us. So, but before we start, I'd like for us to make some commitments. I won't say raise your right hand and say aye, but I'll read out some community agreements and guidelines as we go through the discussion today. So if you haven't already, commit to introduce yourself, especially when you go into the breakout sessions. Be brave and speak your truth. That's important because your truth may set somebody else free. Be kind and embrace different opinions. Everybody doesn't always agree or believe in the same things, but it's good for us all to at least be kind and embrace the different opinions. Be mindful, because it might be an area for you to grow while we're talking today. Notice when you're being quiet and step up. Notice when others haven't had the chance to speak and deepen your listening. I'm always guilty of that. I talk a lot, so I will find times to nudge somebody else to have something to say while we're talking today. Consider the reality that we all have unique lived experience. So there's this old saying that says, your blues ain't like mine. So you can go through the same thing, but come out at a different way at the end. And notice the time and help us make the most of it by keeping your comments brief. I will also take hold of that one as well to make sure as we go through today. I'd like to introduce in this order, Caroline, Shawn, and Mack, who are going to serve as our panelists today. Caroline is the Associate Director at the Aspen Institute's Citizen and American Identity, focused on the challenge of sustaining strong citizenship in America and coherent national identity in the age of demographic flux and severe inequality. Shawn, wave your hand, Shawn. Shawn is the co-founder and Campaign for Equity New Orleans Conversations for Systems Leaders and Influencers about Racial Equity. And Mack, raise your hand, Mack. Mack is the founder and coordinator of a Community Renewal International faith-based nonprofit organization that brings together caring partners to restore foundation of safe and caring communities. We've curated a really good group of thought leaders to really help us build bridging capacity today. I hope you'll be open to the conversation, be mindful of the community rules that we started with, and let's grow together over this next hour plus. So I have a question, and I'll start with Caroline. And Caroline, forgive the way I'm going to ask you this question, but I'm just going to say, why are you telling people to argue at a time like this? What sets you apart?
Thank you, Fred, and hi, everyone. So one of our initiatives in the Citizenship and American Identity program is called the Better Arguments Project. And we created this project to help Americans find ways to engage each other directly across things that they disagree about. And, you know, a call for argument of any kind, whether it's a better argument or not, it may still feel very backwards in a time like this when we're experiencing such deep divisions and such extreme differences in not only opinions, but in the way that we perceive each other as people. And as we're experiencing these divisions, what we often hear, certainly more commonly than a call for arguments, is a call to reunite, find common ground, and move forward together. And we absolutely support these efforts, and we're involved in some of these efforts ourselves. But we believe that there is an important piece that's missing. We can't only engage each other when we agree. We can't only push our differences under the rug for the sake of ease and civility and comfort. We can see in so many different ways around the country right now that I'm sure you're all experiencing, that we simply have to find ways to be able to communicate with each other directly across things that we're disagreeing about. And so that's why we believe that having better arguments rather than having fewer arguments is one key to addressing the types of divisions that we're experiencing. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is really that we believe that argument is fundamental to a healthy democracy. We think that the right to disagree, the right to form an opinion and dissent is essential to a democracy's survival. And we also believe that if we are limiting argument for the sake of finding common ground, we are suppressing a lot of voices. What's going to happen is that we are likely going to only be able to hear from the voices that already have a platform, that already are well represented in dominant narratives around our country. And the voices that are underrepresented will just become further marginalized. And so one thing that we are really promoting by saying, let's have better arguments, is also just saying simply that we believe that your voice matters, even if your experience is different than the one that is represented in the dominant narratives in our country today. But, with all of this being said, we absolutely recognize that the arguments we're experiencing in American life today are inadequate. Again, as many of you can probably relate to, I think that most arguments that are unfolding around the country today would not be classified as better arguments. So we set out to figure out what is a better argument. And I want to just name my partners in this work because this is a collaboration among three groups. It's our team at the Aspen Institute, and then Facing History and Ourselves, a great education organization, and Allstate. And together we defined a better argument as being an argument that is emotionally intelligent, rooted in history, and honest about power imbalances. And we created 5 principles of engagement that help to create a better argument, productive engagement across difference. And just to name each of those principles really briefly, it's take winning off the table, prioritize relationships, pay attention to context, embrace vulnerability, and make room to transform. And what we've done is we have formed partnerships with communities around the country. We've worked in Queens, New York, in the Arkansas Delta, Dumas, Arkansas, in Anchorage, Alaska, Detroit, Denver, and other places to take these principles and these ideas, which all sound really nice, I'm sure, but we had to figure out what does it look like to take these principles and actually put them into practice in the context of a real community that is experiencing real and very complex division. And we wanted to understand if we can actually bring people together to engage directly across differences, can we come out the other side with increased nuance, increased understanding of each other and each other's perspectives? And I think most importantly, the ability to rely less on assumptions about each other that we hear about in these polarized narratives that we're all consuming, and instead be able to actually form our own opinions about each other and about the topic at hand based on that direct engagement. So through the Better Arguments Project, we've built methods and systems and tools for anyone, anywhere to be able to use in their own context. And we really think of this as something that is constantly evolving and requires constant practice. And that is why we are constantly trying to grow our resources. So Fred, I hope that answers a little bit at least why in the world we would be calling for arguments in a time like this.
Caroline, thank you so much. And I just took a big note and it said, take winning off the table. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I appreciate that. That is the one that stuck out the most to me because I'm always trying to win. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Shawn, tell us about the campaign for Equity New Orleans and how you're building bridges to have healthy and transformative conversations about racial equity.
Sure. So glad to be here. I'll say professionally, I'm a real estate developer in New Orleans. We develop apartments, but myself and the 4 folks I host with are all entrepreneurs, and thought it was important to bring non-traditional stakeholders to the conversation. And our objective is over the last 5 years is how do you make New Orleans the most equitable city in America? We think that has moral currency as well as economic currency. And in my work as co-founder of the Campaign for Equity New Orleans, we believe that equity power means reframing problems and determining solutions with a racial equity lens. And so what do I mean by that? We use an analogy that's sort of helpful, we think, to sort of frame the conversation, which is a 2-day conversation and an ongoing one. But we say, if you have, all the folks on this chat, if you have a lake in front of your house, borrow this analogy from the Racial Equity Institute, by the way, out of Carolina, who facilitates for us. But we say, if you have a lake in front of your house and you come outside and there's one fish that's belly up dead floating on top of the lake, you say, what's the matter with that fish? If you come outside and you look at that lake and half or all the fish are belly up dead, you say, what's the matter with the lake? Then if you go a few yards over and there's another lake and all the fish are belly up dead, and then another lake where all the fish are belly up dead, then you say, what's the matter with the groundwater? And we say structural racism is a groundwater issue. In much of the earth, most of the earth is obviously groundwater and below surface, and you can't see it. And so most of us in this work are working on fixing fish, fixing people, and putting them back into a toxic lake, when really we should be working on the groundwater. And so it's very helpful to take systems leaders and say, all the good work you're doing, all the midnight basketball, all the backpack programs, all those things that you're working on to fix people, but you're ignoring the criminal justice lake, you're ignoring the education lake, you're ignoring the housing lake, you're ignoring the income lake, the economic development lake. And so the system is designed to constantly produce outcomes that over 400 years have been white on top, black on the bottom, and everybody in between. And we sort of say that's what structural racism is and is all about. And so we Fred, take sort of I'm from New Orleans, so I like to say it's like gumbo. You gotta be slow about building the base, and then you gotta put in a lot of ingredients. And that's really how we sort of approach the conversation in terms of using data, using narrative change, and really going into history and how race was codified into law. As I said, everybody fits in between, and folks want to say, what do you mean by that? There's other folks here. Into the Constitution, Black people were written into the Constitution as 3/5 of a person. So there's white men and Black people at 3/5, and everybody else. So unless you understand that history, you really can't get at this thing in our opinion. And so over the last 5 years, Fred, we've engaged about 1,400 leaders in the conversation and asked them all to make a racial equity action pledge. And that's how you get racial equity bubbling up. And so the organizing model that we employ really has 5 main components. And this is really what the fundamentals of community organizing. We're just organizing around race, but you have to build relationships. You have to educate folks, you have to develop leaders, you have to increase capacity, and you have to take action. And that's really what it's all about for us as we're sort of organizing. And I'll just leave folks with this. Our hypothesis for folks to understand is that racial inequity looks the same across all systems. Socioeconomic difference does not explain the racial inequity, and systems systems contribute significantly to those disparities. And so we really use that as the base going forward and are really planning that model in New Orleans. And it is, we think, prepared us for this moment in COVID, in George Floyd, the economic inequity, and now the education gaps that you'll inevitably see, where again, Black kids in particular will be on the bottom and everybody else will be on top.
Shawn, first, let me say thank you for the answer. Second, I speak with analogies often, and your analogies and how you explained this was so helpful. And so I'm going to start talking about, talk about the groundwater and from now on how to make gumbo, because those are really good analogies in explaining it. So thank you for that. My friend Mack, tell us about the community renewal and how you're building bridges to strengthen neighborhoods and cities.
Sure. Thanks so much, Fred. And I echo what Shawn and Carrie have said. What an honor it is to be here and be with all of you. I was born and reared in Shreveport, Louisiana, back in 1945. That was a radically segregated community. And I grew up, became a pastor in a local church. And my definition of pastor is a physician of relationships. And so I actually was highly trained in pastoral counseling under one of the fellows that actually developed the entire discipline of pastoral psychology. And so all of my work was, how do you take bruised relationships or broken relationships and help repair those relationships? And one of the things I discovered early on was that every relationship, every human relationship had rules. And to be a friend with someone, you must obey those rules. There are certain things that you must do to be a friend, and certain things you must not do. Certain things you must say, certain things you must not say. And when we slip and fall in our friendships, then obviously another rule is to be able to acknowledge where we have hurt one another and to be able to forgive one another and repair the relationships. So I actually participated for about 16,000 hours of pastoral psychology and counseling over the years in watching human relationships that at various times were not just bruised, but terribly broken. But if folks were willing to forgive one another, then it could, and follow the rules necessary to grow relationships, then their relationships could be healed. And my life changed when I picked up a series of books called A Study of History by Arnold Toynbee, in which he did a comparative study of about 28 civilizations. The conclusion he came to was that every civilization has gone the way of dusty death, not by murder, but by suicide. And so he outlined that. And when I saw that, I said, why do we keep cyclically collapsing our our civilization, excuse me. Why do we keep cyclically doing that? And so consequently, what hit me was when he described the nature of civilization as a system of relationships. That was the aha moment in my life, because then it became obvious that as societies, we were not following the rules of relationships. We could do that on the molecular level, but not on the systems level. And so consequently, I moved back home to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I was born and reared. The year that I moved back, David Duke was running for governor, and he received 2 out of 3 white votes in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I knew that we had all kinds of work to do. And we went to work devising a system whereby we could take individual relationships with friendship as the cornerstone, and relationships are always built upon what we share in common. And we did three basic things. One, we said, what do we share in common? Rich and poor, black, white, brown, young and old, male and female. What do we share in common as the human race? We share together the capacity to care for each other. We said everybody already has that. Now let's become visible to one another. And so we started the We Care team. We've got about 50,000 folks in Shreveport and Bossier on that team. And then we said, we've got to do this block by block. And we identify with one another. We train block folks to make friendship regnant on the block where they live, because now we can email people all over the world. We don't know who's living and dying 4 houses down from us. We've gotten disconnected. So there has to be an intentionality of caring for one another that shares common purpose, which is a key to rebuilding. And then how do we help our brothers and sisters who are trapped in high crime, high poverty areas? And that was the third cornerstone, to actually train folks to move in and to live in those neighborhoods and rebuild. And then how do we take that system and put folks who have joined the We Care team and who have become block leaders and who are working together in neighborhoods, and then bring those all together? And that's been the kind of the ribbon that's tied up the bow. And there is the whole new network that is necessary to pull each of us and to really honor each of us, but to embrace all of us. So that's kind of what we're doing in community renewal.
Wow, Mack, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the trajectory of the work that you're doing and where you are now. That's amazing. As you all can probably imagine and see why we asked this group to come and share as panelists today, because of the great work they're doing. So this is a same question to each of the 3 panelists, and we'll start in the same order that we just did the last 3 questions. So the year is 2050. So I want you to use your wild imagination for this. It's 2050. The world is everything you wanted it to be that you could ever imagine. Describe in a couple of minutes what that world looks like. So I'll start with you, Caroline.
Thank you. And it was so great to hear from both of you, Shawn and Mack, and I'm learning a lot. So, you know, I think part of what it means to be an American in this moment is to really have to question and grapple with what does it mean to be an American. I think that our attempt to answer that question is part of our moving forward right now. And in 2050, I would really love to see a moment in our country when all kinds of people with all kinds of connections to the American identity and all kinds of different American experiences, where all of them can feel like their voice matters, their American experience matters, and is just as American as any other experience. And as I'm learning, you know, from Shawn and from Mack today too, I want our democracy to be representative of all of those experiences. I want our systems to be serving all of those experiences. And I really believe that by responding to a wider range of American experiences, we can move forward towards the more perfect union that we all are striving towards, start to fulfill some of those long unfulfilled American promises. So in 2050, I would really like to see a world and a country in which people really can have full confidence that their voice matters and that they're represented in a place like this. Wow.
Thank you, Caroline. Shawn, it's 2050.
Sure.
Tell me your wild imagination will take us to.
Well, let me kind of put it into context and take us there, because I'm very clear as to what I'd like to see. You know, if you look at the history of recoveries after crisis in this country, you know, post Great Depression, post World War II, those events sort of shook up the way we valued economic and social contributions. However, the way those recoveries were designed doubled down on the racial caste system instead of chipping away at it. And, for example, the Social Security Act of 1935 did not extend coverage to farm or domestic workers, disproportionately excluding Blacks from its benefits. New Deal legislation made available $120 billion, worth $1 trillion today in loans. 98% of that went to white people. The GI Bill of 1944, 95 billion of opportunities went mainly to returning white soldiers. More than 2.25 million soldiers took advantage of the GI Bill, which is among the biggest transfers of economic advantage to one group of people in our nation's history. And so that may mean your grandfather, used the GI Bill to go to college or to medical school, and mine worked maintenance at City Hall. That's not a knock on either. It is a recognition of a system of advantaging one group over another, and how one group gets a headwind and another group gets a tailwind. And so for me, Fred, what I'd sort of like to see, this notion of a hard reset in this moment of crisis, where COVID is a crisis, our political deal is in a crisis, our social and racial unrest is in crisis. We have been here before, and we've hit a hard reset, and we have to determine which direction we want to go with that hard reset. So in 2050, I'd like to see the fruits of a hard reset now, where race is not the biggest determinant of your outcomes in life. That's where I would like to be. Doesn't, your zip code and race and determines, what kind of education you're going to get, how much money you're going to make, how long you're going to live. It is the single biggest determinant in America. And so for me in 2050, I like to see that not be the case.
Wow. Thank you, Mack. Thank you, Shawn. I'm sorry. Mack, it's 2050. Give me your wildest dream for 2050.
I'll just get as wild as you want me to get.
Hey, Mack, not too wild, okay?
I don't care. Listen, I will tell you, this is precisely what I'm living in and what I'm willing to die for, and that is the mission statement of our work is to partner together to make our world a home where every single child, no matter their age, I had to include myself, where every single child, no matter their age, can be safe and can be loved. And so we all know that when medicine was first invented and can cure disease, that was a great thing. But the huge breakthrough with medicine is when it can prevent the disease to begin with. And we have a diseased world in which we have two parts of ourself. You could say it's two wolves within us, grappling with one another and wrestling with one another. And one of the wolves has to do, it's such a strong appetite for self. And then we have a strong appetite to connect with one another. And they're wrestling, and which one of those is going to win by 2050? It'll be the one we feed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to feed this wolf of connecting together for the greater good, and to realize that there are no lifeboats on planet Earth. We are here to live together. And when we can't live together, we have a sick world. And so consequently, the dream that I have is the same that it was a year ago. When I grew up a year ago, I asked my little granddaughters, what is polio? And I grew up in an era in which polio was a greater fear among all of us that lived in America. It was the greater fear than the Third World War. And so that the polio epidemic, and I asked my two little granddaughters, this is a true story, what's polio? And they said, Papa, we don't know. And I live and die for the time that we will be able to ask our babies, what is hate? And they will say, we don't know. And so that's what I'm living and dying for, that the human race will come together in such a way, and we'll commit ourselves to that today so we can grow that into a new tomorrow.
Wow. Thank you, Mack. Caroline, Shawn, and Mack, thank you for those really thoughtful answers to 2050. And I think that the work that you're doing, maybe this will become a reality and not just part of our imagination for what this nation, this world will one day see. You know, we imagine a country that's deeply connected. We know that there are folks all over the country, like our panelists, and each of you assembled here who are working to center those connections and relationships to strengthen local and national communities. Over the next about half an hour, we're going to break into small group discussions to hear the ways that you all are building bridges and how we can work collectively for a world just like our panelists have envisioned. And so with that, I'm going to break us into, and we'll go into our small groups. I hope everybody will stay with us, turn your cameras on, and remember the rules or the our community commitments that we stated at the beginning. So with that, let's go into our small groups for about 30 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. We were just together a little bit. We had some really amazing conversations in our small group, and I hope you did as well. So I welcome you at this time to share within the chat box your reflections from our breakout sessions. Anything that you want to share that kind of stuck out to you from your time together in your small group. We'd love to see what the transcript looks like. To our panelists, to Shawn, to Mack, and to Caroline, I have a couple more questions for you. If you'd be willing to share a reflection, just one, after from your time in your small group. Caroline and Mack, we were together, so I would love to hear what you took from our session. So we'll start with Shawn, and then I'll go to Caroline, and then I'll go to Mack.
I think generally speaking, I mean, there are many reflections to sort of share, but one that just sticks out to me that seemed to resonate was this whole notion of proximity and what are we doing with that, and how do we sort of lean into proximity as a conduit to vulnerability, and how that can be a useful tool, especially with family and those people who are closest to us, where the conversation may be the most difficult, just to sort of break through noise and clutter with folks that you feel so close to and love so much. So that really was a theme that sort of jumped out. And as I shared with the group, is certainly, you know, part of how we bridge build in our work down in New Orleans in these difficult conversations is, you know, born from Brian Stevenson sort of approach to juvenile justice is you have to get proximate to the problem. You have to be on the ground. Somebody told me that hummus, the root word hummus is close to the ground. I did not know that. And so that's important. So I think proximity, Frederick, is what jumped out from our session. Wow,
thank you for that, Shawn. Caroline?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's so much, but I think mainly it's just a powerful group here together today, in the sense that no one here is waiting around for someone else to solve the problems. Everybody here has rolled up their sleeves, which I think is really awesome. And, you know, our group was acknowledging the real risks and real vulnerabilities that are involved in bridge building work of all kinds. And first of all, we thought that acknowledgement was important itself, but also just really how powerful it is that despite that, we are finding ways, everyone here today in different ways is finding ways to show up anyway and to invite people in anyway. And we talked about the idea that fundamentally we are responsible to each other and for each other. And I found that really moving.
Thank you, Caroline. Mack, last but not least.
Well, least and last. And so, you know, I kept thinking of that great quote by Lewis Mumford, that the chief enigma of all history is, why do we keep collapsing the societies that we construct? And, you know, my take on that is that here are all these caring people, but we're caring in isolation and in insulation and individually, and we're not bound together in our caring to be a powerful force. And I promise you this is true, because I don't have, nobody's paying me $100 to say this, but I promise you this is true. I felt in our small group, just to hear the individual caring, but wrapped together, thanks to Weave, I really just said, gosh, there's such power here together. And it made me want to just get together with everybody. So it was, to me, it was just a wonderful experience, and nobody's paying me to say that. So it gave me just, gosh, if we just keep coming together. So God bless Weave.
Well, thank you for that, Mack. A couple of just quotes that stood out in the chat session from Hershana Turn, building bridges through understanding, empathy, and commitment to continue learning. And I think that is the part that sticks out to me there is the continued learning, like continuing to learn will equal building a bridge, right? So stretching a little bit. And then from Joe Barton, small groups openness to share to new possibilities struck me as powerful. Not only were we open, but we were prepared to embrace new departures. And finally, we were discerning a practical means of moving forward. I was deeply moved and wonderfully energized. So that's just amazing. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So to each one of our panelists, one last question as we get down the road to wrapping up about what's your commitment to weaving across difference? What's your call of action to this group? And we'll start with Mack. We'll go with Shawn, and then we'll go to Caroline. So,
well,
go ahead, Mack.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say that my commitment years ago, when I was really led to leave the pastoral ministry and return back to my hometown, was a commitment that continues through to Weave, and that is to be present anytime, anywhere, to any size group, and simply to be used as an instrument in whatever way we can be used. I mean, that's, again, by bringing caring people together and by weaving them together in common purpose, we become an army. And it doesn't mean that we expunge our wonderful individualism and the preciousness of our personalities. Quite the contrary. This enhances our personalities. And so, I'm all in, and whatever I can be or do, that's why I'm here today. I was invited, and I'm committed.
Wow. Thank you, Matt. Shawn, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say that, I don't gamble. I have gambled, but I believe in sort of doubling down. And so, I'm doubling down on this whole question. A lot of folks run away from the conversation on race, but we found it it's a tremendous organizing mechanism, is that people want to, in many cases, understand, celebrate, and amplify difference in a constructive way, to sort of see me in how I'm seen and how I want to be seen in the world. I know friends come from a heartfelt place when they will say, I want to be an ally to people of color. Well, racism affects everybody. It affects Black folks and white folks. So it's not really about being an ally. It's really, seeing folks for who they are and bringing their full selves. I tell people all the time, we say in our session, what do you like about being Black? What do you like about being white? I like being a Black man. And it's just not about that. It's really, I think the courage to engage and sort of see that difference. And the last thing I'll sort of say and sort of offer up, because Crystal told me I could, is, when I say double down, we try to find different ways to engage this conversation. So on September 24th, we'll have I guess, folks in about 20 cities coming together that night and race around the table to have facilitated discussions about race and racial equity. I think we're expecting about 300 folks to host 8 to 10 people across America, and Austin, Texas, Flint, Michigan, New Orleans, Northwest Arkansas, Minneapolis, DC. And so, we try to extend that invitation to folks to get engaged. And even if you don't get engaged in this and go to it, find ways to get engaged and double down on it.
Mack, thank you for that. Caroline?
Thank you. Yeah, my commitment is to really work on challenging my own biases, continuing to make myself vulnerable and engage in conversations with people who don't agree with me. And I would ask that all of you continue to do the same. And my offer too is that if we can help you with that through tools or opportunities and whatnot, we would love to do that. We are going through a launch on September 28th, where the Better Arguments Project is launching a new set of materials and new opportunities to get involved with us, along with just an open invitation to all of you at all times to let us know what else we can be doing to help you kind of practice these types of behaviors in your own context, in your own communities, because I really deeply believe that this type of behavior is contagious. And if we can model it, other people will start to do it too.
Wow, thank you, Caroline. To Mack, Shawn, and Caroline, anything burning you'd like to say before I get ready to end our time together?
Let's do it again.
Perfect. Mack or Caroline?
Yeah, I'm just glad to be on board.
Same here. Thanks to everybody. It's been awesome being with all of you.
So to everybody who joined, I want to say thank you. But to our really amazing panelists, Shawn, Caroline, and Mack, I want to say thank you for your time and your really thoughtful answers and consideration to today. This world is in a really precarious time, and it's going to be incumbent on each one of us to kind of help navigate us through some really weird and choppy waters. So there's going to be a survey link in the chat for you to rate your time with us today. You can join our project online at weareweavers.org, and you can also take part in our Weaving community campaign at weaving.us. I'd also, before I end, I'd like to just a couple of things, personal things, right? So Adilio on my team, who's like a real quiet storm, never really likes public attention, but Adilio has been working to help curate this with the Upswell team. And so if you see him on there, just give Adilio a thumbs up because he's really amazing. He's going to be really upset for me calling him out like that publicly, but Adilio is a force, and just really appreciate his really thoughtful consideration for this. And also, I'll tell you, there's somebody who joins each one of these who always calms my spirit. Her name is Jen. And if you see Jen, give her a thumbs up. She's really amazing. If you're ever in a small breakout group with her, you want to be in a group with Jen because she's just amazing. Everybody else is pretty amazing, but I had to just shout Jen out as well. In our small group, Robert shared a quote from Mother Teresa that just simply says, "We are responsible for each other." And so if we are each responsible for each other, let's leave here and let's continue to model the actions that we want to see our world ultimately begin to show and achieve. And together, I'm almost certain that we can weave together our nation's tattered social fabric, and we can make the world a better place. So with that, I'll leave you to the rest of the day. Have an amazing day. It was good spending this last hour plus time with you. Bye, guys.